of this country and right across the United Kingdom. But please do the decent thing also for the nursing staff. Get round a table and start to talk to me on their behalf. That's the only respectful and decent thing to do. And let's bring these strikes to a conclusion by the end of this week.
The NHS is running a bank holiday-style service today, with many operations and procedures either cancelled or rescheduled. NICU nurse Keris Parfitt told GB News striking was a last resort.
I love my patients more than anything, and you hear a lot, why do you deserve more just to do your job, or you knew what you were getting into. I didn't know what I was getting into. I did not know it would be this short-staffed and I would spread myself so thin. I was never going to be rich being a nurse, but it breaks my heart to see the conditions and patients not getting the care that they deserve.
Today's action comes ahead of a strike by ambulance workers. Thousands of paramedics, technicians and other staff are due to walk out tomorrow. Health Minister Will Quinn says serious call-outs must be covered.
My message to the unions is clear. These strikes are unjustifiable and unnecessary. The government accepted the pay review body's recommendations in full. If strikes are to go ahead, then it's important that patient safety is the priority for the unions, as it is for the government. And that's got to be ensuring that the most serious call-outs for ambulances, so Cat 1 and Cat 2, for example, are covered on strike day.
The Prime Minister is due to be questioned by a super committee for the first time. Rishi Sunak will appear before MPs who chair Foreign Affairs, European Security and Home Affairs. He'll be scrutinised on topics like the rising cost of living, migration and the war in Ukraine. TSB Bank has been fined £48.7 million. It's after city regulators found a botched IT upgrade in 2018 meant many of the lender's 5 million customers couldn't use internet, mobile and telephone services. The Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulation Authority say the IT switchover disrupted the bank's entire branch network and had a real impact on people, including those who were vulnerable. A House of Lords committee is warning a wave of early retirement since the pandemic is the biggest cause of labour shortages across the UK. The Economic Affairs report says the government needs to look at inactivity across the market to support the economy, calling the outlook bleak. It's found more sickness, people moving abroad and an ageing population have all contributed to a worker shortage. In the US now, and the committee investigating the Capitol Hill riots have referred Donald Trump for prosecution. It said the former president should be charged with 4 crimes. They include conspiracy to defraud the US and insurrection. The Justice Department will now make a decision and they could press criminal charges. Mr. Trump has dismissed the investigations. He says they're politically motivated. The Met Office says the next year could be the 10th year in a row that temperatures rise above pre-industrial levels. The forecast estimates global average temperatures next year will be around 1.2 degrees Celsius, what they would have been before the year 1900. It's said while 2023 may not be record-breaking, increasing global greenhouse gas emissions will make it another hot year. The Bank of England has unveiled a new set of banknotes that feature King Charles III. His portrait will appear on existing designs of all 4 notes from £5 to £50. The Royal Household says new notes will only be printed to replace those that are worn out and to meet demand to minimise the impact on the environment. They're expected to be in circulation by mid-2024. Banknotes featuring the late Queen remain legal tender. They can be spent as normal. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops across the day. Now let's go back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Here's what's coming up on the show today. Thousands of NHS nurses will walk out today for the second time in less than a week in a protest over pay. It comes as the government prepares for last-ditch talks with health unions to stop ambulance workers and paramedics from joining the wave of industrial action. In just a moment, I'm going to cross over to a picket line in Birmingham to see what the nurses have to say. And the actor James Murray, who you might recognise from The Crown, will be joining me in the studio later. He's going to be telling me the tale of going from actor to angler and how he wants to reduce the decline of salmon in the UK. And I'm going to be joined by a feisty panel this morning, the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, and the author and broadcaster, Amy Nicole. It promises to be a lively one. And of course, this show is nowhere near as good without you and your views. So don't forget to vote in the poll. On Twitter, we're asking, should Rishi Sunak find the funds to pay nurses more? Around 55% of you say no. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews to have your say. So the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, will meet with unions today in a last-ditch attempt to avert walkouts by paramedics and ambulance staff. NHS bosses have warned that the strikes will mean that patients who've suffered strokes or heart attacks could be denied ambulances. It comes as around 10,000 nurses begin their second 48-hour strike in less than a week. Let's cross over now to one of those picket lines in Birmingham, where we're joined by our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, outside the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Good morning, Jack. Nice to see you. What is the mood like down there? Who have you been talking to?
Well, Bev, the mood is pretty jubilant in terms of everyone coming together and uniting. That's the main thing that they've been chanting here, all about uniting together as nurses. But the one word that keeps coming up to me when I've been speaking to nurses is retention, and that kind of splits into different levels of safe staffing levels to make sure wards are properly staffed so that patients can receive the best care. A lot of nurses here, pay is the second thing that they're worried about, because the main thing that they do this job for is to care for people. That's why they get into this profession. Pay is the other thing, and that leads into retention of students that have just graduated and having enough pay to be able to pay off their student loans, but also be able to earn a decent wage while doing this job. But also about agency workers, and a lot of people saying that student nurses or nurses that have just graduated are going to work for agencies, or nurses currently in the system are going to work for agencies because they can get better pay than they can from actually working in the NHS. But here this morning, there were nurses speaking about why they're striking.
Nursing is a fantastic career, but anybody who works here will tell you it's not something we do for pay. It's something we do because we care, but we also need to be paid to do it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any striking is disruptive, but for us, we've got, lives in our hands, so it's a really tough decision for us to make, but we've been forced to make this decision because we're getting no other option. Nobody's listening, so we're going to shout until we're heard. Getting a lot of support from the public, but I think a lot of it is people are still on the wards because we do care. There's not a single one of us that would walk off and leave a ward unstaffed because we care about our staff, but it's starting to feel like that's what's going to have to happen, is that we are just going to have to completely all walk out at the same time and leave no staff to man the wards and force those above to do the care and do what we have to do daily so they see what it's like, and maybe then we'll get some attention and we'll get some support.
And so that's what some nurses have been saying here. In terms of the element of pay, of course, the RCN are asking the government for 5% above inflation. That's kind of been said that that's not going to happen. Of course, they've had a 4% pay rise this year, but the questions about whether the government should come to the negotiating table. Of course, they're negotiating today to try and stop paramedics going on strike. So 10,000 nurses are on strike today. Of course, 16,000 appointments roughly had surgeries and all sorts had to be kind of suspended and cancelled at the last strike. Similar numbers will be happening today. There are still protected services, including chemotherapy, emergency cancer services, critical care units, etc., that are still going on today. And they're saying the advice is that if you've had an appointment and it's not yet been cancelled, still go to that appointment, but expect a lot lower staffing levels while nurses here are on strike.
OK, thank you, Jack. Jack Carson there at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. Thank you for that update. So joining me now from Liverpool is intensive care nurse Kelly Hopkins. Hello, Kelly. Thank you for joining me today. So you are striking, presumably, today, are you?
Yes, I was striking on Thursday as well, but I was on my day off, and I'm on my day off today.
Right, OK. So we've just heard there from a nurse in Birmingham explaining all the difficult kind of conditions really that nurses face every day, that it's not just about pay, although people might think it is. Just let us know from your perspective as an intensive care nurse, what are the challenges that you face?
So it does amount to pay, but the problem is we've got 60,000 vacancies at the moment. We can't attract new talent into the profession. I was speaking to a newly qualified nurse on Saturday who, as newly qualified, she's £65,000 worth in debt. She's earning £27,000. That's before tax, national insurance and pension. And we need a decent pay for a decent day's work so that we can fill those vacancies, and then that would stop the short staffing on the wards. As a ward nurse, you have the decision. You might have 4 patients who are going to fall out of bed, 4 who need the toilet, someone who's got difficulty breathing. Which patient do you go to first? And this is why care's being affected. Yeah. As a nurse, I came in because I wanted to hold someone's hand. I wanted to brush their teeth when they were unable to do it. I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. And you can't split yourself in 2. Wards are running on 2 nurses, looking after all these patients who have demands and they need to be looked after. And as a nurse, it's such a difficult decision that you've got to make. And unfortunately, it is patient care that's suffering.
What impact has the pandemic had on nurses, Kelly? Because some people are holding up signs today saying, CLAPS don't pay our bills. Was there a sense that there was a huge outpouring of appreciation and we've moved on, and actually it all felt a little bit tokenistic, that you need proper rewards for the time that you put in?
Definitely, yes. I think, saying that we were heroes. I walked into that intensive care unit not knowing what I was going to face. And I did it because that was my job. I was more concerned about whether I would bring anything back to my home and to my children. But I went to work and I looked after those patients, not knowing what we were dealing with that very first wave of COVID. We were doing shifts in PPE that wasn't fit for purpose. I was coming out of the unit and having to change my scrubs because the uniform, the PPE that they gave us wasn't the right PPE. It was plastic boiler suits. Look at the government gave PPE contracts to their friends, to their family members, all that money that was wasted.
Yeah.
And yet they couldn't protect us then either.
And also, of course, there was then the pressure on the nurses, Kelly, to have the COVID jabs, whether you'd had COVID or not. There was mandates in place. How did that affect the psychology of a lot of the nurses?
A lot of the nurses did choose to be vaccinated. I personally chose not to. I'd had COVID. I'd worked in COVID throughout. I had antibodies, and I took the personal decision not to have that vaccine. I didn't feel that there was enough research around side effects. My body had done its job. I was lucky I had the antibodies and I wasn't really ill from COVID. And I believe in freedom to choose, not have a gun held to your head to say if you don't get vaccinated you're going to be sacked. Look at all the nursing care home workers that were sacked and now on the news, and the government are saying, oh, there's nobody there to work there. Yeah, because you sacked them, most of them, because they wouldn't take the vaccine.
Yeah, and I think that's all of that together has led to this kind of perfect storm of dissatisfaction and disempowerment, really, amongst nurses. Because we ripped up the medical ethics when they said you've got to take this drug whether you want it or not, really. It ripped up hundreds of years of medical ethics, even in a clinical workplace. And so do you think this is just about pay now? I mean, I know you say a lot of the nurses are saying it's not about pay, but there's a sense of disgruntled workforce. And the pay would act as what? A recognition of what you've been through? And do you think the 19% is too much?
We're not asking for 19%. This is another misinformation that the government are giving out there. We've asked for 5% above inflation. The last pay rise that they gave me, which I've been waiting 9 years for, enabled me to buy 1 extra loaf of bread for my family a week. That is what that pay rise equated to. And if you think that that is a deserved pay rise for the work that we do, then come. I say to all the people who say go back to it's easy to be a nurse. It isn't easy to be a nurse. If it was easy, lots of people would come into the profession. It's a hard job anyway.
It's a really hard job, Kelly, and I think it's one of those, it might be because it's mainly women, right, that it's not really respected. I'm just going to put it out there. I can't help but think if nurses were predominantly men, maybe they'd get paid more. But it isn't valued, is it? It isn't valued. It's hands-on hands care. It's a human being caring for another human being. Yeah. And I think it's a terrible indictment, actually, on our society that we no longer value that. It's not just giving them a packet of pills. It's caring for somebody and making them well.
It is, and it's not just supporting, especially in the intensive care unit, it's supporting the families that are going through the most horrendous time that they will ever experience when someone they love is on a ventilator and you don't know whether they're going to survive. You know, and we support the families as well as looking after the patients. I mean, the ward staff, they've got lots of patients to look after. And like I say, if there's only one nurse looking after all those patients, care is suffering, and it doesn't sit right as a nurse that we can't deliver the care that we want to for our patients.
OK, well, thank you for your work from us. It is a valued profession, and I think there is a conversation to be had that it needs to be remunerated in a more significant way to at least attract people and to reward the nurses for the work they do. Intensive care nurse Kelly Hopkins there. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, don't forget, we are running this in our poll. We're asking you whether Rishi Sunak should find the funds to pay nurses more, even if it isn't that complete. As we just heard from Kelly, she said the 19% is a little bit of a kind of red herring. It's obviously they wanted a percentage on top of our significant inflation. You are voting in that poll. I can't see what it is, but I will let you know. I think it was about just over 50% of you at the moment say that he shouldn't be finding the money. Right, send me an email as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. In a few minutes, I'll introduce you to my guests for the first time today. Getting ready for action on the Breakfast Bar, we've got author and broadcaster Amy Nickel and UKIP Deputy Leader Rebecca Jane. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 10:22. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Let me introduce my guest to you this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol, a familiar face to GB News, and Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. You will also all be very familiar with Rebecca. Right, let's start with you. All right, we had this news yesterday. It broke on air. This is the fact that the Supreme Court, or the High Court, sorry, in the UK has said that the Rwanda plan can go ahead. It is lawful to relocate individuals to a third country under a bilateral agreement, gives an essential seal of approval to Sunak's plans. How did you greet this?
I have no time for the Rwanda plan, I'm afraid, because it's an absolute PR stunt. It's a waste of time. It can only take 200 people. It's going to take months before anything even happens. It won't happen. So the plan is a waste. We need a better, proper plan. I like to think that UKIP's got a better, proper plan, but I would say that, obviously.
Of course.
But essentially, no, I think that the Conservative and Labour, I don't think either of them have got a good idea between them.
What would you do?
Personally, I think that the problem is getting to shore. So I don't think we should be letting people get to shore. I think that we should be turning them back before they get here. I think that we should be heavily investing in our systems and the management behind the infrastructure of it, because that's another way of which it fails. We need to stop sending money to France. What on earth is that all about? That's ridiculous. So, yeah, my biggest part of it is stop people getting to shore.
And how would you distinguish, though, between people who genuinely need to seek asylum and those who are coming here to have a better life and make money?
I think right now, personally, for the next 5 years, we just need to stop all of it because we can't cope. We are at absolute breaking point in every possible way of the country.
But that's got nothing to do...
Hang on a minute, Amy, before you even start.
But you've gone there already.
Of course I may.
You've all started. You've both started now, right? Amy, so just stop all immigration. You mean legal...
For 5 years... Yes, I absolutely think that we should, because I think that we need to get a grip on our country as it is. I think we need to have better systems, better structures. I think that we need to be looking at the nursing situation, the NHS, our schooling systems, and then we need sensible immigration.
Yeah, but all that has nothing to do with immigration. Like, you can't blame immigration on the country's failings, which is very much in the hands of the government.
But
the government are responsible for the failings of public services, but that's got nothing to do with immigration. If anything, surely immigrants coming into this country would profit the country, because they come in, they generally arrive much more willing to work. They don't really use the NHS much because they're generally younger, and they put in a lot more than they take out, and that's just a fact. But I do agree with you completely that this Rwanda scheme is completely unworkable. And the fact that the Conservative Party think it's a PR stunt is disgusting to me, because it might be legal now, but that doesn't make it ethical.
So do you think when Priti Patel introduced this, did she know at the time that it would never come to fruition?
I think possibly, and the biggest joke here is that we've paid Rwanda 140 million, and also with these 200 people that are costing 140 million, we are taking 200 Rwandan refugees back.
Yeah.
So it kind of balances the books there. It also only has 10% of public support. So it's not popular with anyone.
So stop it.
So basically what's going to happen now is they had got this sort of green light in principle yesterday, which was taken to court as a judicial review in the name of 8 individuals, because she has to take a judicial review under the direction of an individual person. You can't just, you and I couldn't just say, I'd like you to look into this. And so these 8 individuals now will appeal. And then if they are found, then they aren't successful, then they will have their own cases heard individually to go to Rwanda. I mean, the notion that this is actually going to happen, it will take months, it will probably take years. Nobody will be on a flight before the next election.
So let's rip it up and start again.
Yeah.
Because it's not workable.
What a waste of time and money.
It's also, would you not agree, like, it's fundamentally such an ugly, it's probably one of the ugliest policies I've heard. It really shook me. When I first saw it, I thought it was parody.
So did I.
Also, the way they're saying, Suella Braverman said, it is not a punishment. Well, if it's not a punishment, then how is it a deterrent? Surely if it's so fantastic in Rwanda, then more people are going to come over because you get a nice new life in Rwanda. It's absolute nonsense.
You might have a point.
It is not grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And it was actually tried in Israel. Israel tried a similar scheme. And most of the people that went to Rwanda, that was voluntary though,
right.
they ended up just going missing because they didn't stay where they it doesn't work. They came back to Europe.
This is the problem, is that when people come here, they go into these beautiful 4- and 5-star hotels and then they just go missing.
But they're not beautiful, are they?
4- and 5-star hotels.
No.
They're not bad. They're just some of them are like a slightly dodgy.
That's misleading.
Kind of.
They're out of use.
Listen, we might not be... I mean, you know, all-inclusive, free healthcare. I think it sounds pretty fancy, actually, to somebody from Albania.
See, I think it sounds like prison, actually. You're not allowed to work. You're detained until who knows when. You don't know when your case will be heard. You haven't committed a crime. No one's here illegally. And you're just stuck in limbo in a travel lodge. What kind of life is that?
Obviously quite appealing to 45,000 people who have made the journey.
Then it must be pretty bad where they come from.
Right, let us move on to talk about... talking about wasting money. PPE contracts. The government is now suing the PPE firm that is linked to Baroness Moan. They want their we want our £122 million back. I almost can't look at these stories, Rebecca Jane. I find them
disgusting.
So stomach-turning that we gave away so much taxpayers' money on what appear to be corrupt, shady backdoor deals for PPE during the COVID pandemic.
Yes, and I'm going to stick my neck on the line and say that I believe that Michelle Mon belongs in prison.
Yeah.
What has happened?
Totally. This isn't a civil case. This is a criminal case.
Absolutely. And this is, for me, one of the reasons why the House of Lords needs abolishing, because it's a farce, an absolute farce of people just being able to give to their pals fancy titles, fancy jobs, fancy money, and she has incredibly profited. And, you know, and let's not even go into the whole COVID and the PPE and actually whether it was even a good idea or not in the first place. This is corruption at the very core of our government, and something needs to be done, let alone a civil case trying to get back 120 million. Lock her up.
Yeah, totally. And this is the tip of the iceberg, because this is one case. Yeah. There was £1 billion worth of these PPE contracts. And then the VIP lanes have been deemed absolutely fine to continue to go ahead. So this type of thing will continue to repeat. This is fraud. This is stealing. This shouldn't be done in a civil case. This should be done in a criminal case.
I feel like the most insight we've got into what was happening during the pandemic actually is in these Matt Hancock diaries. In the extras that we've seen so far, and also in the article that Isabel Oakeshott wrote. She obviously ghost wrote the book with him, for him, and then she wrote a piece in The Spectator explaining all the other facts that didn't make it into the book, her perception. And what was obvious during this time is that nobody was talking to each other. No department was communicating with each other. It was a kind of mission creep, she said, that it just sort of snowballed. I don't know. I mean, so do we think this could be incompetence? I think what you're saying is not incompetence. They saw an opportunity and they ripped us off.
This is fraud. Yeah. And actually, what happened when COVID hit is the government turned into headless chickens.
Yeah.
You know, we saw it, that they brought in new laws overnight. It literally felt at one point in time, you know, when they were, you know, it got to about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then all of a sudden Boris would be like, lock down the north. Have you had one too many glasses of wine? What is wrong with you? Like, it just felt like every day they were chopping and changing. You know, I was trained in law school. The first thing that we're taught is how long it takes laws to come in and the process and the decisions that are made. And they threw it all out of the window because they didn't know what the heck they were doing. They had no grasp on the situation whatsoever. And then fraud unfolded, and now we're dealing with the consequences.
It does feel like that.
Sorry.
Go on, Amy.
Just to put it into perspective, so they wasted 37 billion on track and trace. If we gave everyone in the public sector, the pay demands that they're looking for, it would cost 18 billion. So we can afford to waste 37 billion and not really talk about it, and also write off COVID fraud, write off these PPE contracts, 1 billion wasted in this, and yet we can't afford to pay our workers properly. It doesn't really make math sense to me.
It doesn't, and it doesn't feel like anybody is asking the right questions of the Rishi Sunak. When journalist gets him in front of them, they're not asking these questions. They're not piecing it all together and
you
finding
guys
out.
do. You guys ask the right questions. The difference is that you're not on the seat in front of the table because of the mainstream media agenda.
It does feel like that. Right.
And the Tory core. But I think it's good that me and Rebecca can completely agree on this, because you wouldn't have thought we would, but...
Absolutely. And you know what? It will be, if they can sort it, if they can answer this, it will be a vote winner for them. That's what they don't seem to understand. Right, ladies, thank you. We will be doing a little bit more after the break. I'm going to be delving into the world of carbon credits. The European Union announced this weekend that every citizen will have to start paying for their carbon emissions in an effort to cut emissions by 55% by 2030. Is this the first step of a personal carbon credit system? I'll have worked out how to say that when the news is finished.
A very good morning, 10:32. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Thousands of nurses are striking for the second time in under a week. Staff in England, Northern Ireland and Wales have walked off the job in a dispute over pay and conditions. The Royal College of Nursing has warned the action could go on for 6 months unless an agreement can be reached. The union's calling for a 5% above inflation pay rise, but the government says its demands are unaffordable. The Prime Minister's due to be questioned by a super committee for the first time. Rishi Sunak will appear before MPs who chair Foreign Affairs, European Security and Home Affairs committees. He'll be scrutinised on topics like the rising cost of living, migration and the war in Ukraine. TSB Bank has been fined £48.7 million. It's after city regulators found a significant proportion of the lender's 5 million customers couldn't access internet, mobile and telephone services for a period in 2018 because of a botched IT upgrade. The Financial Conduct Authority and Prudential Regulation Authority says the switchover had a real impact on people, including those who are vulnerable. A new set of banknotes featuring King Charles III has been unveiled. The royal household says they'll only be printed to replace worn-out notes and to meet demand, to minimise the impact on the environment. They're expected to be in circulation by mid-2024. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're up to date on GB News. Let's give you a quick snapshot of today's markets then. The pound will buy you $1.2211 and €1.1598. The price of gold is £1,487.13 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,356 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, this weekend, the EU agreed on a carbon market overhaul in a bid to hit the 2030 climate goal. It aims to reform the EU's emissions trading scheme, the biggest carbon market in the world. Every citizen will have to start paying for their carbon emissions in an effort to cut them by 55% by 2030. So is this the first step to a carbon credit system? You might be thinking, what on earth is she talking about? But I do think this is going to be one of the most important issues in our future in the next 50 years. Professor John Grant is a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change, and he joins me now. Very good morning to you, John. Can you just explain to our listeners what a carbon social credit system looks like?
Well, it's an amount of carbon that you can emit. So at the moment, the credits are given, and over time, we're going to see that reduced until eventually you're going to have to pay an amount of money that is similar to the amount of harm that carbon is going to put into the cause to the environment. And this process here that Europe is doing is following the scientific sort of kind of what it's proved that we need to by 2025 kind of max out on how much carbon we're emitting, and by 2030 we should be looking at halving our carbon emissions, and this is going some way to that by cutting hopefully by about 55% that carbon.
So at the moment, in the EU, there are businesses that have to apply to this scheme. It's complicated. You could see that we're both sort of struggling to find the language. Now, what happens when something new comes into our world, particularly in such a significant way? It's hard to find the words to explain what it means, doesn't it? So just explain to me, if you will, on a very basic level, if you're subjected to this, and I don't use that phrase lightly, John, if you're subjected to this, what might it mean for your life, your everyday living?
Well, hopefully it means that you'll be more efficient to meet these terms. That if you just try a business as usual and try and pay it off, well, that's going to be expensive. But the good news is that when a company, and it's been shown for many years now, when a company really embraces this and sees it as an opportunity for the future, the way that they meet these carbon reductions is by improving efficiency and often becoming more profitable. So you know, the companies that refuse to change, they're the ones that sort of get kind of punched. It should be noted that, you know, when we're dealing with people as a whole, you know, it isn't the low-paid workers that produce huge amounts of carbon. You know, our top 10% wealthiest people in the UK produce about half the emissions in the UK. And so, you know, when you're looking at capping the amount of carbon that people emit, it's those people that are probably going to be concerned. And from my point of view, honestly, I think that, just because you're wealthy, it shouldn't give you a right to pollute our planet.
If I've understood this correctly, and as we say, these sorts of ideas are not introduced. We don't have this here yet in the UK. It's obviously creeping in, racing in quite quickly, really, over in the EU. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, John, does it, that the rich will have to change their behaviour? Because what is highly likely is that the rich will somehow be able to pay off the government in order to buy more carbon credit. Isn't it the poor who will find themselves not able to take, when I say the poor, I mean we normal people, to take a flight to Spain once a year or go and visit the family in Greece? I mean, that's how it's going to affect us, isn't it?
Well, it could. There's no doubt that wealthy people have got some very clever men and women working for them. And which is why, from my point of view, and I know this sounds quite extreme, but I think there needs to be a rationing of how much carbon it is. It shouldn't be on how wealthy you are, because like you said, you'll just buy it. But if everyone is actually allowed a certain amount of carbon, and then if you don't use it, maybe you could sell that, then the people that aren't using the carbon could actually be beneficial. But this is the only fair way. You're right. Otherwise, wealthy people are just going to get on their private planes and do what they do, and I can't deny, that really makes me quite angry.
Yeah, good. Me too, John. It makes me really, really angry. To be honest, the whole thing makes me quite angry. Why do we need it?
We are in a climate emergency, so we do need to reduce carbon. We can't do a business as usual. And just because this is really hard, and it is really hard, doesn't give us the sort of the get out clause that we shouldn't change, because my kids are going to struggle if we don't pull back the amount of carbon.
But don't we need, John? Don't we need some carbon in the atmosphere? Don't we? And carbon. How much of the percentage of our atmosphere is actually carbon?
Well, about 0.3%. Yeah, it's a very
0.3%.
small amount.
It's a really tiny amount. And do we know how much of that is definitely generated by man-made behaviour?
Well, the proportion isn't the figure. It's probably only a small percentage. But what it is that is more than the natural amount. A bit like a bathtub filling up. It doesn't matter if it's just a drip adding to it. It is that drip that is going to overflow the system. And it's our addition to the natural systems that is causing these problems. I mean, 40 degrees, it's 20 degrees warmer outside than it was 4 days ago. Just outside my office. That's not normal. This is a very uncomfortable truth that we have to kind of face and try and manage. And a business as usual option is going to be catastrophic. This is a real emergency here that we have to match.
OK, thank you, John. I'd love to talk to you again. I love your enthusiasm and your passion for that topic. Professor John Grant is a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change. Rebecca, I didn't even have to look at you during that interview. I could sense your body language. We're in a climate emergency. You're going to have to drive less, consume less, turn down your heating and never fly.
We're not in a climate emergency. It's not happening. It's absolute hysteria. And the problem is when we hear stuff like that, it's making things worse. It's got to stop, has to stop. This taxing scheme, the problem, you're absolutely correct. The wealthy will not be impacted. He's literally just sat there and said to us that the wealthy are causing...
Find a way. And they're causing
this issue, and they will find a way.
I know exactly
so once again, the hard-working person will get penalised, whereas apparently, and also man-made. No, the studies that I have seen that actually climate change is not mainly down to man-made. He couldn't even answer the question.
I mean, I definitely don't agree with that.
No, I didn't think.
But I don't agree with him either, because people will buy carbon offsets. So even though you're getting a allotted amount of carbon, if they pay for carbon offsets, then they're clean as whistle. They can go about, and that's what people like Bill Gates currently do. So it will definitely divide and I think penalise people with less money, businesses with less money. So I don't think it's the right way to go about this.
Hardworking people. We're in an absolute state of a country right now, and let's make it harder for the 99%, whilst once again we try and make it easier on the 1%. This has got to stop. There's no emergency.
I mean, there is an emergency, Rebecca. There is.
No, Amy, there's not an emergency.
You know what is an emergency? The emergency is we've got to talk about Aladdin. We've got to talk
better.
about a pantomime featuring Come Down to Our Oriental Town has been condemned as being too white. Go for it, Rebecca.
Oh, bless them. Listen, in some ways, I agree with this. I think that there should have been a bit more consideration for diversity. I really do. However, it obviously does buy into the woke agenda quite a bit that we're not allowed to do these things. My concern is that in 5 years' time it'll be wrong to have a white Santa. That's kind of my concerns with where these kinds of stories go. But I do think that they should have been a little bit more considerate. Go on, Amy.
The UK Pantomime Association has also condemned the production. You have something in common with the UK Pantomime Association. Who? Amy Kell.
I mean, this isn't a new story. Aladdin has been considered problematic for a long time because it is riddled with racial stereotypes. And if you look at the heroes of the piece, they're anglicised. The main character in the Disney version was based on Tom Cruise. The only people who have a more accurate Arab representation are the villains. So it is widely regarded as culturally insensitive. And every year we have this conversation about Aladdin. And I know this is about a specific production, but I actually think there are enough stories, pantomime narratives that we don't need to keep going over the same old ones. So let's just drop Aladdin now. It's had its time. We can see why it's problematic. Even Disney have had to change a lot of the words in the songs. I mean, I'm not all right with that. Why? We don't need to be sentimental about these. That if we look at it with the 2022 eyes, it's not. It is outdated. And it does offend a lot of people.
I don't think I'm familiar enough with Aladdin as a story to know whether it does have a... I mean, it has a flying carpet. That's kind of... And you rub the lamp and then the genie appears.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful location. And Aladdin and Jasmine fall in love and ta-da, the end.
That's a really... That isn't... I wish it was that. But unfortunately...
we're talking about ta-da falling in love and that's the end, which brings us nicely on to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
The real princess.
So we've had the docuseries on Netflix. His book is about to come out, and now Harry is doing an interview with ITV journalist Tom Bradby in order to promote the book. You know what, Rebecca? For a couple that really just want their privacy, they're doing a really good job of not getting it.
Aren't they? This is the biggest PR campaign that I think that we've seen this century, potentially, for the couple that wanted to go away to America and live a lovely, happy ever after life. You've got your lovely ever after life. Hang on a minute, I'll get my words out. You've got your lovely, happily ever after life. You're living in your multi-million-pound mansion. You've told your story on Netflix. I really think that 6 episodes on Netflix could have been spent for far better reasons and far better causes than their narcissistic trail of a love story. Your love story is great. Knock the rest of it off.
Spot on. Do a pantomime about Harry and Meghan's love story.
Somebody will be. I'm sure somebody will be writing it. But he's... I don't know what else there is to say about Amy. I don't know what else he could possibly put in this book that we haven't seen in the 6 hours of Netflix.
I mean, I'm kind of getting to the point where I think if you like them, read it. If you don't, put it down. But I will always say that Prince Harry's done great things for mental health and getting awareness. And I remember he talked a lot about some of the therapies he'd had, and people hadn't really heard about that in the mainstream before. So I think he does more... Well, I know he does more good than harm. Controversial as that may be in the current crisis of the monarchy.
When we talk about bombshells, did you actually find any bombshells in that Netflix?
Not enough, not nearly enough.
I'll tell you what the bombshell was for me, is that neither of them were posh enough for the royal family. They just couldn't buy into the ridiculousness of it. I think they were ostracised by the royal family, and I think they probably were a little bit, not because of the race, but because they're not posh.
I just don't think they liked him.
And also, I think she was so totally naive. She was completely ill-advised. She didn't have enough people around her to explain this is how it works.
She's a
and
bit
also,
American
I think
for
the other
it.
bombshell was quite how motivated they are by money. Now, that might make me sound as naive as Meghan Markle, but the fact that they sat on that poolside of Tyler Perry, the actor, and Harry said, this could all be ours, as opposed to the little cottage they were living in Kensington Palace. It was like, OK, you're showing us actually what you are motivated by. They're motivated. And then how pleased they were when she got a text from Beyonce.
Yeah. I mean, but you would be.
You would be. Prince Harry, how can you be impressed by Beyonce?
I know, yeah, that's kind of the things that I was just like, you're really dissing this cottage. And it's like, that's a beautiful little cottage in a very expensive part
But
of
not
London,
what you would
darlings.
expect a prince to live in.
But also,
I think that's only the point that we're making. A lot of it has been like willfully misinterpreted in the most aggressive, horrible way possible, when I think a lot of it was quite innocent.
Maybe. Right, Rishi Sunak has waded into the Gary Neville story. We spoke about this yesterday. It's moved on a chapter. Gary Neville was doing the football commentary at the end of the World Cup final, and he launched into this attack on the British government and said that they were demonising nurses, demonising ambulance workers. Rishi Sunak has now said that he's got to stick to football. He's criticised the pundit for arguing that people should detest low pay and poor working conditions. Is it right that Rishi Sunak's made a statement about this, do you think, Rebecca?
A little bit, yes, because Gary Neville, nobody needs to hear your multi-million-pound opinions on this. I don't understand what place he thinks that he's got in politics. You're a football pundit. Sit there, talk about football, leave it to everybody else. Because he's getting involved in things that just don't concern him, and that he's got no. I mean, she says sitting here ranting to high heaven.
But I'm thinking, but you know what? Okay, so here's my feelings. You were a psychotherapist, you were a writer, you were working in the media. You've been driven to political action by the things that you believe in to go and work with UKIP. How is he any different? Maybe he's just making that transition.
And look at the last footballer who we went on about, like, who should stick to football, Marcus Rashford. And he luckily didn't stick to football and made real changes, which a politician hadn't and wouldn't have done. So I think Gary Neville has... I thought I got his name on there. Gary Neville has got a point. The UK government is currently demonising striking workers, and I think Rishi Sunak is probably very aware of that. So the fastest thing he can do is say, stick to football. However, I don't agree with Rebecca's point that people with vast wealth shouldn't or can't care about those without. I hate that argument.
I don't think he cares. I think he does. He sat there in the Qatar World Cup being paid multi-million pounds to be there, and then saying that we should be talking about poor working conditions. You're part of the problem.
But wouldn't it be easier for him to not say anything?
Well, I think
it'd be right.
I guess the question is, was it the right place to say it? When he's being paid by ITV, he obviously knew he's got the biggest audience that he was going to have in a very, very long time.
Well, exactly.
And it took his moment to say it. I know our viewers didn't like it. We did a poll on it yesterday.
I think that's exactly when he should say it, when he's got the biggest platform and the biggest audience possible.
But
although it is difficult for him to take a moral high ground.
He could come off if he really wanted to make a change and make a difference. Marcus Rashford did it in a different way. If Gary Neville wants to really make a change, what he should have done is he should have come off that. He should have probably turned down his multi-millions to sit at the Qatar World Cup.
That is a point.
And then he should have come out and said all the things that he's got to say if he really wants to make a difference.
But he also owns Salford City Football Club, I think, now as well, of course, and that's a bit of a money pit, I imagine. And he might say, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, he might say, well, I need to make my money so that I can pay my workers at Salford City better, so that I'm not, I can make my money in my own right as an individual. I can plough some money back into my business. I'm just putting it out there.
I mean, what he said is true. The UK government have been systemically demonising rail workers and health workers all month.
I think demonising is a strange word. They might not have been rewarding them, but I don't...
They said they stole Christmas.
They've put lives at risk. I'm all right with that. I'm all right with it. The people are going to die because of what they're doing. I'm all right with it.
The government. It stops with the government. They need to negotiate. They need to sit around the table. All the people the rail workers, the ambulance workers, they have families that are going to be affected. Go on, Bev.
Right, we've got to move on. Sorry, end of our first hour. We'll be right back with more after the weather.
Hello there. Welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. An improving picture today with some sunshine through the afternoon, although still squally showers across the north as well as the west. Here's your bigger picture. You can see this area of low pressure across the northwest of the country. That's going to stay with us for the next few days, delivering showers, longer spells of rain from time to time. However, through this afternoon, bright with some sunshine across England and Wales, breezy across the northern and western portion of Wales, where we could see a few showers running in, and frequent showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Certainly towards the west, we'll see some wet weather here. And over the highest ground, some winteriness. But for much of eastern Scotland, you'll see some brighter skies through the afternoon, a similar situation further south as temperatures rise very nicely. Now, through the evening and overnight, those showers continue across more northern and western areas with severe gales across the far northwest of Scotland. Elsewhere, you can see this showery rain moving in across Wales, northern England, the Midlands, the West Country, slowly slipping down towards the southeast as we head through tomorrow morning, although it could be a bit of a foggy start here first thing, and even a touch of frost in shelter spots towards eastern areas of Scotland as well. So through the morning, you can see this rain clearing yet again towards the southeast. Before that, though, around rush hour, expect some moderate bursts. Further north, these showers will become more frequent and widespread as we head through the day on Wednesday, and again, snow over the highest peaks. The showers extending down towards Northern Ireland as temperatures rise yet again to around 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. So that's the picture on Wednesday. Through Wednesday evening and overnight, you can see this feature just running in across Ireland, and that will yet again affect the central swathe of the country as we head through Wednesday night and into Thursday. Showers further north. And here's your outlook for the next few days. It's turning colder across the far north with some snow showers, rain from time to time further south.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner Today on GB News. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is set to face scrutiny from the Liaison Committee this afternoon over key political issues. Migration, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living are just some of those that he will be grilled on. We're going to find out what might be in store for him. Actor James Murray, who plays Prince Andrew in The Crown, is going to join me a little bit later on to explain why we need to stop and think before we buy our Christmas salmon. And as always, I'm going to be joined by my panel to discuss today's top stories. Don't go anywhere, that's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
A very good morning to you. Just 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Thousands of nurses are striking for the second time in under a week. Staff in England, Northern Ireland and Wales have walked off the job in a dispute over pay and conditions. The Royal College of Nursing has warned the action could go on for 6 months unless an agreement can be reached. The union's calling for a 5% above inflation pay rise, but the government says their demands are unaffordable. The General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for failing to negotiate.
I want to say to the Prime Minister this morning, please step in now and do the decent thing on behalf of every patient and member of the public of this country and right across the United Kingdom. But please do the decent thing also for the nursing staff. Get round a table and start to talk to me on their behalf. That's the only respectful and decent thing to do. And let's bring these strikes to a conclusion by the end of this week.
Trainee nursing associate Victoria Busk is at a picket line in Birmingham. She says nurses will continue to shout until they're heard.
Starting to feel like that's what's going to have to happen, is that we are just going to have to completely all walk out at the same time and leave no staff to man the wards and force those above to do the care and do what we have to do daily so they see what it's like, and maybe then we'll get some attention and we'll get some support.
The NHS is running a bank holiday-style service today, with many operations and procedures either cancelled or rescheduled. NICU nurse Keris Parfitt told GB News striking was a last resort.
I love my patients more than anything, and you hear a lot, why do you deserve more just to do your job, or you knew what you were getting into. I didn't know what I was getting into. I did not know it would be this short-staffed and I would spread myself so thin. I was never going to be rich being a nurse, but it breaks my heart to see the conditions and patients not getting the care that they deserve.
Today's action comes ahead of a strike by ambulance workers tomorrow. Thousands of paramedics, technicians and other staff are due to walk out. Health Minister Will Quinn says serious call-outs must be covered.
My message to the unions is clear. These strikes are unjustifiable and unnecessary. The government accepted the pay review body's recommendations in full. If strikes are to go ahead, then it's important that patient safety is the priority for the unions as it is for the government. And that's got to be ensuring that the most serious call-outs for ambulances, so Cat 1 and Cat 2, for example, are covered on strike day.
In some breaking news now, the MP Andrew Bridgen has told GB News his appeal against sanctions following lobbying breaches has been dismissed. He's being suspended from the Commons for 5 days after the Standards Committee found he displayed what it described as a very cavalier attitude towards the rules. The Prime Minister is due to be questioned by a super committee for the first time. Rishi Sunak will appear before MPs who chair committees on foreign affairs, European security and home affairs. He'll be scrutinised on topics like the rising cost of living, migration and the war in Ukraine. TSB Bank has been fined £48.7 million. It's after city regulators found a significant proportion of the lender's 5 million customers for a period couldn't access internet, mobile and telephone services in 2018. It was because of a botched IT upgrade. The Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulation Authority say the switchover had a real impact on people, including those who were vulnerable. A 97-year-old woman has been convicted of Nazi war crimes for her role in the murder of thousands of people during World War II. German media reports the former Nazi concentration camp secretary has been convicted of aiding and abetting the murder of more than 10,500 people between 1943 and 1945. Imra Virchner has been handed a 2-year suspended sentence under juvenile law as she was about 18 years old at the time of the crimes. A House of Lords committee is warning a wave of early retirement since the pandemic is the biggest cause of labour shortages across the UK. The Economic Affairs report says the government needs to look at inactivity across the market to support the economy, calling the outlook bleak. It found more sickness, people moving abroad and an ageing population have all contributed to a worker shortage. The Met Office says next year could be the 10th year in a row that temperatures rise above pre-industrial levels. The forecast estimates global average temperatures next year will be around 1.2 Celsius above what they were before the year 1900. It said while 2023 may not be record-breaking, increasing global greenhouse gas emissions will make it another hot year. The Bank of England's unveiled a new set of banknotes that feature King Charles III. His portrait will appear on existing designs from all 4 notes from £5 to £50. The royal household says new notes will only be printed to replace those that are worn out and to meet demand, to minimise the impact on the environment. They're expected to be in circulation by mid-2024. Banknotes featuring the late Queen, of course, remain legal tender and they can be spent as normal. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Bev.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is set to face scrutiny from the Liaison Committee this afternoon over key political issues. Migration policy, strikes, the cost of living and the war in Ukraine are all expected to be mentioned, but having only been in office a short period of time, is he likely to be criticised by them? Later in the show, I'm going to be joined by actor James Murray. You might know him as Prince Andrew in the new series of The Crown on Netflix. But he's got another passion that he's going to share with us, our waterways, how important they are, and what you choose to put in your shopping trolley this year when you go for your Christmas salmon. That's all coming up. I'm going to be joined also by my guests in about half an hour when we look at the day's biggest stories, including Amber Heard settling a defamation case with Johnny Depp. And of course, this show is always made better by you and your views. Today on Twitter, we've got a poll asking you, should Rishi Sunak find the funds to pay nurses more? 55% of you think no. 46% of you at the moment, 45% of you say yes. And most of you, 54%, only marginally more of you, say that he should not be finding more money to pay the nurses. Keep your votes coming in. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. So, PM Rishi Sunak will face the Liaison Committee today for the first time since he came to office in October. Having only been in office a short period, he's likely to be scrutinised heavily on key issues such as strikes, the current cost of living crisis and migration policy. So let's go now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, to tell us how Sunak might react. What might he face today, Darren?
Well, if it's given anything that he said to date, Bev, it's likely he's going to dig his heel in over these strikes. Last couple of minutes, we've got a new round of strikes by rail workers. 15 different companies now all walking out on the 5th of January. It is clear we are, frankly, in a very deep dive of industrial action. Some might brand it the winter of discontent. We've got nurses out on strike today, paramedics tomorrow. We're looking at border force guards going out over Christmas and the New Year, which will almost certainly likely cause disruptions to people flying to and from for Christmas and the New Year. And it goes on, and there is no end in sight to all of this. So it's maybe not a surprise that it was discussed at Cabinet this morning. It will be, as you say, brought up in front of the Liaison Committee a little later on today. Now, that's the committee made up of the chairs of the various select committees within Parliament, 14 of them. They've got 90 minutes with the PM a little later, though they do tend to run on a little bit, these things. This is essentially the last day of Parliament, by the way, before it breaks up for the Christmas break. I think Rishi Sunak, when it comes to nurses' pay in particular, has insisted he's not prepared to talk about pay itself. He's happy to talk about working conditions, what more they can do around the edges, but he's not prepared to talk about pay. He insists that the government has committed itself to the independent pay bodies kind of solution to all of this, and that frankly, if they were to cave in and give more money to nurses, it would help fuel the inflation crisis that the country faces. It makes things worse. Now, it must be said, actually, lots of experts think that actually public sector pay isn't a big influence on inflation. But at the moment, the Prime Minister is not moving, and some of us Conservative MPs are slightly concerned about all of this, not least of all because politically it seems at least when it comes to nurses and paramedics, the public are on the side of the unions, and indeed with some of the other strike action that's taking place, and not with the government. But also there's just concern by the impact this is frankly going to have on lots of people's health in the coming days. Ministers this morning not able to guarantee, for example, that people who've had strokes or heart attacks or have fallen downstairs are going to get the care and attention and the emergency services that they frankly would need within the space of time that the government has set down with targets, for example. And so we could see people needlessly die or end up in much worse conditions this week because of that strike action. And as I say, there is concern within the Conservative Party that actually in the end it will be the government that gets the blame for this and not the unions, not least of all because, for a lot of people, nurses worked through the pandemic, didn't they? And there is a sense that maybe they do deserve a pay rise, or that they're only taking this action because they feel it's absolutely necessary.
Let's talk about Andrew Bridgen. This is news that has literally broken kind of in the last 10 minutes or so, Darren. What's happened to him? He's the MP for North West Leicestershire. He's been a very vocal critique of the vaccine rollout programme in the last week, and he's been suspended for 5 days. Are those two issues connected?
They're not, because this dates back actually to a couple of months ago, in the sense that the House of Commons authorities had ruled against Andrew Bridgen when it comes to paid advocacy, lobbying, if you like, for example, and not properly declaring it. He had launched an appeal against that suspension for 5 days, and as you say, in the last couple of minutes, it's been confirmed he has lost that appeal. The Commons authorities not convinced that he didn't break these rules. At the time, it was said by the committee that he took a very cavalier attitude to the rules, that he breached them on multiple occasions and in multiple ways, and the Standards Commissioner, Catherine Stone, described it as an unacceptable attack upon the integrity of Parliament. So, as you say, he's been suspended, or will be suspended, for 5 days. In addition, 2 of those days will be for 3 breaches of the code. So, at the end of the day, he will continue to be an MP. I'm sure he's not going to resign over all of this. But it is a reminder that Parliament and paid advocacy and lobbying, is a real issue of concern. It's about, people are asking questions in Parliament and asking ministers and lobbying ministers as a member of Parliament. The big question is, what is the reason behind that? And it seems, in not being open and transparent, Andrew Bridgen has fallen foul of the rules.
He's certainly got a little controversy around him at the moment. He did a speech to the House of Commons about 6 or 7 days ago where he wanted to raise awareness of COVID vaccine injury harms, and he had to give that speech to a completely empty House. There was about 6 or so MPs in there. And then yesterday he was saying that in 2020 he was told by Pfizer that they intended to give people boosters every 3 months. And there's a lot of questions being raised. But I think what you're saying is very important to point out, that what he's been suspended for now is not related to these, even though there might be some people there who are quite glad to think he's not in the House for a week or so. What else do we think Rishi Sunak is going to have to deal with this afternoon, Darren? How do you think he'll do, by the way? Because this is the first time that we're seeing him under these situations. He's quite a slick character, is he not? I mean, in terms of his performance and how he will come across today, do you think he'll be convincing?
Well, it's going to be really interesting to watch. As you say, he is, or has not done this before, and it is in many ways more intense, the scrutiny, than you get at Prime Minister's Question Time, because he's there for a long time, as I say, at least 90 minutes. They can properly go into issues and repeatedly question them, and it will be, of course, some Conservative MPs, there will be Labour and opposition MPs there as well. And is it going to be as dramatic, probably, as Boris Johnson's last one, which was the last liaison committee? Liz Truss never faced one 6 months ago, when he had to resign the next day, when it looked like literally his government was falling apart. When it was during that committee, even though he was providing the most anodyne answers about slightly odd topics at the time. I don't think it's going to be quite the kind of popcorn committee that we had back then. It'll feel very much like an end of term, I think, committee meeting. What else will be aside from strikes? Yes, of course, there'll be focus on the economy. We're almost certainly, I think, in recession at the moment. You know, what is the government's plan to get growth back into the economy? But also the war in Ukraine will feature quite heavily. There had been reports over the weekend that Rishi Sunak was going to carry out like a review of what Britain had contributed over the last year or so to Ukraine, and whether this going forward would be done on a kind of basis of, well, what are we getting out of it? Is it effective? Is it working? Now, Downing Street are trying to insist this is not a sense that Britain is in any way stepping back from its commitments to Ukraine, though there is concern in some quarters that could be the ultimate consequence of this. Rishi Sunak in the Baltics yesterday insisting the UK is committed to all of this. But there is a sense that Britain wants to step back a little bit and look at what its contribution to Ukraine was. So there'll definitely be questions on that. And there may well be, as there always are, you know, end-of-term questions. As I say, it is the end of the year. He's not been in the job for very long. That might be a bit left field. So it'll definitely be worth watching, but as I say, there is a sense that Rishi Sunak is far-fighting on lots and lots of different levels, but the political stability at Westminster, well, it's a lot more stable than it's been for the last 3 to 6 months, but that's a pretty low bar, Bev, I would suggest.
OK. Thank you, Darren. Darren McCaffrey there at Westminster. No doubt will let us know how Rishi Sunak gets on this afternoon. You've been getting in touch with me about the nurses' strikes. David says, I'm sat with my partner who is a nurse. She does a 12-hour night shift and has to sit on a school dining chair for an hour for her break. No canteen, no facilities at night. She comes home broken. And Stephen has said, Bev, no, nurses should not get anywhere near 19%. 33 to 35 grand is a good wage. Thousands of other workers get nowhere near that. Most nurses work in ordinary wards, not all work on A&E. And John says, well, at least the nurses seem to be having a good laugh on the picket line. It's a shame the patients are suffering because of them. They're selfish. And we have got a Twitter poll running on this, so please let me know what you think. Should Rishi Sunak find the funds to pay nurses more? Cast your vote now. Marginally, 54% of you say that no, he should not find the money for them. So, after the break, I'm going to be back with my guests in just a moment to discuss the top stories of the day, including Amber Heard settling her defamation case with Johnny Depp. Do you remember that? Lots to discuss, all after the weather.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Very warm welcome back. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. It is 11:20. My guests are still here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by writer and broadcaster Amy Nickel and Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Now, Amy, troops cannot treat patients or use blue light during industrial action when they're covering for ambulances. What?
Well, of course they can't, the soldiers, but it's very important that the ambulance workers should not be feeling guilty about this news. The government should be feeling guilty because the point is that these strikes could have been prevented. So something very similar happened in 1989 and a deal was met because they gave into public pressure, and I think the public really are on the side of the ambulance workers and the NHS staff and the strikers in this instance, and they gave a 16% pay rise and a winter bonus. A lot of people at the moment are pushing, should they get this big increase? Well, maybe, but they would settle on something slightly less and then have something to get them through this difficult time as a bonus, as a one-off payment.
What do we have this independent pay review board for, though, if not to make these recommendations and then the government to act upon them? You know, we've got independent boards that decide what our emergency services should be paid, and yet our emergency services are just ignoring them and saying, well, we want more.
No, I want more. Can somebody in accounts please listen to me? I would like more. But yeah, this is the problem, and then it's the military that get drafted in and penalised for this, as well as the people that will die in this process, as I keep on saying. It's interesting, actually, Amy. You say that you think that the public are on their side. I don't quite think they're on the side of the nurses, if I'm honest, because of the 19% that they're asking for. That is going too far, and I think that this is why the government's not negotiating with them. And then that poor woman from the RCN sat on all the television shows going, please talk to us. Well, you've gone in too high, you're being unrealistic, and we don't negotiate with terrorists. So get your ideas more realistic, and then we may talk.
Well, she is the head of the Royal College of Nursing.
She's not actually even talking about why they're doing it. She just keeps on saying, talk to me,
The point is, they won't talk to her. And you talk about people are going to die because of these strikes. People are dying already. The delays for ambulances are already at incredible highs. If you take maybe last month, people were waiting hours and hours and hours. I heard about a man who broke his hip. He was on the floor outside for 7 hours. This was before the strike. Right. The strike is necessary so that we can get this industry in a place where it's appealing and you can actually retain the staff.
Now then,
attract the staff.
Listen, you know we've got a bit of a difference of opinion on this. So,
well, we shouldn't.
They are wanting more pay for themselves. OK. How do we think that that is going to solve the shortage problem? Because then more people may come into the industry. Personally, what I think that they should be saying is, rather than paying us more, pay us a realistic amount, maybe 5% more, and then reinvest it into getting more people in to actually help the shortages. You're not going to save lives by paying the people that are already there more.
I guess the point is, in Scotland, they talked about it, and I think they came to a rough, I think it was 8%, and the strike didn't go ahead. So it shows that talking, negotiating, actually looking at it rather than going 19%, that's not tenable. But at the moment, the industry, the job isn't tenable. You can't go on like this.
Pat Cullen went in too high with that 90%, though, didn't she? And she may, but then, you know, it's a negotiation process. Maybe she expected them to come back with 10%. You know, it's in line with inflation. Yeah. But for whatever reason, she got it badly wrong. Do you think Labour are playing politics with the strikes here as well, though, Rebecca. You know, to be given that they are such major funders, the unions are such major funders of Labour, these strikes make the Conservatives look really bad, and Keir Starmer is waiting in the wings to sweep in and save the nation.
Yeah, and I think but I do think that the tables are turning because it seems so unrealistic, and we were just talking before that I feel like to an extent this is a bit of a privilege for a public sector kind of worker because the rest of the private sector don't get the chances to do that. We can't afford to be going around demanding 20 more, you know, pretty much 20%. Yeah. But yeah, no, I do feel like it is a little bit of a ploy, but I think it's a ploy that's going to backfire.
Will it? Will it backfire? I think this is only going to be good for Labour, isn't it, Amy?
Yes, because it's highlighted the absolute dismal state that this that 12 years of a Tory government has left all our public services in. Yeah. We aren't a poor country. There is plenty of money to go around, and I think people are really seeing how unfairly that wealth is being split. Distributed. That's
Can we talk about where some of that money is? And it's at the top.
Right,
exactly.
So from ambulances to Amber Heard.
OK.
OK. Amber Heard settles a defamation case with Johnny Depp. Right, this was going on a while ago. So how has this moved on?
Rebecca is an expert in this.
Go on, Rebecca.
So because she went to appeal, she lost her appeal, and then they've obviously gone through a negotiation process of how it can actually be settled. What I find fun from this article is the line from Amber Heard. Now I finally have an opportunity to emancipate myself from something that I attempted to leave over 6 years ago. No, you didn't. No, you did not. You have created this. The other thing that I really don't like, this is not an active concession to be paying him $2 million. That's the problem. You don't get what you've done. So therefore, they shouldn't have negotiated until she actually realised the error of her ways, pay the $10 million.
So this is the point. She was told to pay $10 million, and they've gone away and negotiated it, haven't they? She's not going to have to pay him the $10 million. I'm not sure if we're clear at this stage what she is going to have to pay him. Are we?
$2 million.
$2 million.
The thing that I just think every time we talk about this subject, it puts off another woman from coming forward about domestic violence. I think the vilification of her has been disproportionate. And
Nobody came out of this well, though, did they? Neither of them came out of it well.
No, but I think there's nuances to the verdict that didn't completely absolve him of doing any wrong. Rebecca, you know more about this than me.
Nobody looked good, like Bev says. It was a pretty atrocious situation for everybody that unfolded. However, the only person that did damage to domestic violence, genuine victims, was Amber Heard herself. Because the things, it just wasn't true. The things that she was saying, that's what happened. And yes, she was vilified, but I think that the public saw through it because she deserved to be vilified in the end. And I say that as somebody that was actually on Amber Heard's side in the first trial in the UK. And then when we saw it unfold in the US, and I literally tuned in every day, it was like the modern day Judge Judy, and it was amazing. I saw a completely different side, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel awful that I actually was on her side before because I saw the truth.
It's just so dangerous, isn't it, to vilify someone with a domestic violence accusation? Because
yes, but this was right.
It's just continuing to...
I can't remember what happened. I can't lie to you. I've just been handed this story, and I can't remember whether he was found guilty or not.
He was... It wasn't completely... So, no, he wasn't...
Dry, was it?
No, he was the problem. So, no, he was...
They were married from 2015 to 2017. Yeah. She accused him of being a wife beater. He took her to court to clear his name, didn't he? OK, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah. And then what happened was, so the majority of it was found that, yes, no, she was absolutely wrong to make the claims that she did.
So she lost that? He won it, didn't he?
She lost it, but then he also lost a slight...
That's right.
...element as well. No, then, the only reason why he actually lost a slight element was because it wasn't him that made the claim, it was his agent acting on his behalf, and he should have known. He may not have known, but the court said that he should have known what the agent was saying on his behalf, and that's why $2 million was ordered against Johnny Depp. But actually, Johnny Depp was not specifically found to have done any wrongdoing in any of it.
But did the two little dogs take a poo in the bed?
This is the detail.
I believe so.
We can remember those sorts of details.
Yeah, that's all I remember,
It was just a sort of public bonfire of the vanities, is what I remember, and I didn't really like it. You were gripped, were you?
Yeah. I loved it. I had a great time. But
there is something fascinating about in-court cameras. I think because we don't have that.
Yeah.
It was kind of intriguing.
And, you know, and they were so outlandish and ridiculous and over the top, and then all of a sudden Kate Moss gets dragged in. And
that was
it's like, are we joking? This is real life unfolding. You couldn't actually write it.
No.
It was crazier than a Johnny Depp film.
But isn't it now being made into a drama?
I think there's talks of it.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of Colleen and Vardy. Oh, my God.
That's
I'm getting my court cases mixed up.
Now, after the break, I'm going to be joined by actor and angling activist James Murray. You might know him from his TV show with Robson Green. He's going to explain why our salmon stocks are in a desperate state and what we should look for when we're buying our Christmas salmon. That's all after your morning's news with Rosie.
A very good morning to you. It's 11:30. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The MP Andrew Bridgen has told GB News his appeal against sanctions following lobbying breaches has been dismissed. He now faces a 5-day suspension from the House of Commons after the Standards Committee found he displayed what it described as a very cavalier attitude towards the rules. More as we get it. The Prime Minister is going to be questioned by a super committee for the first time. Rishi Sunak will appear before MPs who chair Foreign Affairs, European Security and Home Affairs committees. He'll be scrutinised on topics like the cost of living, migration and the war in Ukraine. A new set of banknotes featuring King Charles III has been unveiled. The royal household says they'll only be printed to replace worn-out notes and to meet demand. That should minimise the impact, they say, on the environment. They're expected to be in circulation by mid-2024. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're up to date on GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2157 and €1.1442. The price of gold is £1,486.50 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,361 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 11:35. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, joining me now is famous actor James Murray. You might know him from a series of The Crown, where he plays Prince Andrew. But a big passion of James's is something you may not know about. He's wild. He's wild for salmon fishing. I didn't write that, James. He's wild for salmon fishing. The Loch Long Salmon Company is proposing plans to house tons of salmons. James, thank you for coming in. Famous actor in The Crown and other series that we will know you from. A lot of people will also know you from the series that you do with Robson Green.
Yeah.
The fishing series.
Robson and Jim's Fly Fishing Adventures.
Thank you. I've watched every single episode.
I bet you have.
I haven't. But is that where your interest in the waterways and what's happening to our fish stocks came from?
Yeah. I mean, when I fell in love with fly fishing for salmon 15 years ago, it became very obvious to me very quickly the big challenges that salmon faced as a wild species. And it was shocking to me. And I thought, well, if I didn't know about it, perhaps many others don't.
Yeah.
So I sort of made it a bit of a life's work to educate and create awareness.
Wow. What do we need to know about? So just presume I'm an idiot.
Yes.
Now, we should also confess that we've known each other for 25 years, so you know that I am an idiot.
Yes.
Right.
There's not much pretending there, Bev.
So what is wrong with our fish stocks, particularly salmon? Where have we gone wrong?
Well, salmon, let's start at the beginning. So since we started taking proper records in the 70s, there were 10 million wild Atlantic salmon as a population. There are now only 3 million.
Wow.
That's across the whole of the North Atlantic. Scotland, the rivers up in Scotland have lost 70% of their wild stock in the last 20 years. So they're on an acute decline.
Why?
Well,
where have they gone?
There are several suspects. Obviously, climate change is first and foremost. Overpollution of the rivers, bad regulation of predation from aviation prey and from prey under the water, but also aquaculture, fish farms. The salmon that you buy in the supermarkets and at the fish counter is predominantly farmed Atlantic salmon.
Right.
And there is a myriad of issues when it comes to the sustainability of farmed Atlantic salmon.
Right.
And the best way to perhaps educate about that is to visualize how these fish are farmed. So if you imagine rows of circular nets beneath the water, which are open, crammed full of farm fish, so it's rife for disease, pathogens and parasites. So that has to be treated. Obviously, the knock-on effect on that is huge animal welfare issues. 25% of all farm salmon die before they even reach the age of harvest. That's 1 in 4. That's, just to put that in perspective, that's less than 5% of poultry die. You know, that's their mortality rate. So there's the animal welfare issue. There's also the spreading. The real problem fish farms have is trying to keep the lice under control, the parasites, which tend to eat the fish from the outside in. Now, that spreads through the net out into the surrounding environment. And these farms are on coastlines and in estuaries where the wild stock, where the wild salmon, the few that are left, and the sea trout swim past, and they get ensconced in this proliferation of lice. So it's huge.
So whose job is it to kind of police that? Is that the Environment Agency? Is it DEFRA? Is it, why is this being allowed to happen? I mean, like you say, there's not a lot of awareness about it.
There's not a lot of awareness. It should be regulated by government bodies, DEFRA, SEPA up in Scotland, the EA. But sadly, as we all know, when it comes to the environment, the current government have the will and energy of a stranded jellyfish. So it needs to be much more heavily regulated, but there's too much money swishing around the system for it to be too heavily regulated. These companies, aquaculture is predominantly owned by a very small handful of Norwegian billionaires, which have shareholders to account for.
Yeah.
So there is a mitigation to stop most of these issues, and that is to move the salmon out of open cage farms and put them in self-containment pens, which obviously creates a barrier between the fish and their environment. That costs money. Now, I believe that the customer will probably pay the extra to ensure that the fish they've got on their plate is sustainably farmed. But they don't want to do that.
And if there's awareness of it, I guess. So if we are buying our, let's say, Christmas, your salmon, smoked salmon is a big part of Christmas, right?
Yeah.
If we're going out to the shops to buy it, what should we look for? How does the producer or the manufacturer of that fish, how do they tell us what we are and are not buying? What do we look for?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, the only way we can educate ourselves as a customer is to look at the label of the product. Now, we know that, with other products, that supermarkets and suppliers who tend to be in cahoots about their labelling make it less than opaque a lot of the time. So there's a lot of self-aggrandizing labelling, such as organic or responsibly sourced. Pay no attention to what is obviously a label that's self-inflicted or self-imposed.
Yeah.
Go look for a label from an independent regulator.
Kind, yeah.
Best of which, as far as I'm concerned, is MSC, which is a big blue tick on the packet, and that stands for Marine Stewardship Council.
Right.
And they are an independent body that certify whether that product is sustainably sourced or not.
Will it be more expensive for people?
It might be, but if you swap out your farmed Atlantic salmon for line-caught wild Alaskan or sockeye Pacific salmon, which have their own issues but aren't farmed as intensively and are more sustainably farmed for the most part than their Atlantic cousins, then you're going to pay the same price for a fish that has higher nutritional quality and is much more sustainably sourced.
So it won't say farmed Atlantic salmon. Will it say farmed?
No, of course not. It'll say Scottish, beautiful Scottish Highland salmon. So you think, oh, someone's gone out and caught that and prepared it. No, it just comes from a big stew pot of fish in the middle of it.
David Attenborough has been talking about this, I think, hasn't he, as well?
Yeah.
Like, he's one of the few people that's been discussing it. Have you got another series of your fishing programme?
We do. We have a second series coming out in the spring, where we're up in Scotland and Wales and England, and we're addressing this very issue because we were asked to go and make a fishing show because the first one achieved a certain amount of
really
love.
well.
So we went back and did a second one for ITV, and we found very quickly that we weren't catching the fish that they expected us to catch.
Maybe you're just rubbish fishermen.
Well, we are rubbish fishermen too, but it was also to do with the state of the rivers, and we were pulling our hair out, going on the phone to the commissioners, going, we still haven't caught fish. And it's not our fault, so we made it about conservation and the state of our rivers as much about us being terrible anglers.
So you'd notice that difference in that short period of time?
Oh, yeah. The graph is acute when it comes to salmon. It's tragic. That we'll probably lose them in our children's lifetime, certainly, if we don't do anything about it now.
OK. One last question. What was it like being on The Crown, playing Prince Andrew? Dilemma? Was that role easy to take?
Yeah, it was a shoo-in. No, it was fun. I mean, we didn't deal with any of the topics that he's so prevalent for in the press at the moment. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
great fun being on The Crown.
Oh, James, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Right, now, 10,000 NHS nurses, as we've been talking about, have walked out today for the second time in less than a week in a protest over pay. Our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has been speaking to nurses this morning in Birmingham. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
So there's two things here. There's the pay element to try and recruit and retain qualified staff. Only the other day I saw an advert for an agency that was offering between £30 and £40 an hour, and that is where nurses are going to, because they can go and earn more even if they were to travel for an hour or so than if they were going to work in the NHS. So we need to recruit and retain, and we also need to have succession planning for nurses like myself who have specialist skills, because there's no one out there now at the moment to replace people who are retiring.
I mean, each and every single person has made a very difficult decision to be out here.
we all have the worries. Are the staffing levels going to be safe today? Are people going to be getting the care that they need? But we've put lots of measures in place to ensure that there are safe staffing levels. And I mean, the term safe staffing is safe staffing levels. We don't get that on a daily basis generally, so we need to do something.
And you haven't got the time, that's the problem. You come into nursing because you want to help your patients, and you can't help your patients if you've got someone that's end of life and you've got other patients you need to help as well. You can't give them the sort of care that you want to give them, and you don't come into nursing so that you can't actually look after your patients. So if we can't get better pay, then what's the solution to getting more people to come in? And it's not just nurses, it's the whole of the NHS that's on their knees at the moment.
Welcome back. Now, I am still joined by Amy Nicole and Rebecca Jane. Right, what is Sunakism? So this is an article that we're going to discuss now. What does he stand for, Rishi Sunak? I do think it is quite hard to work it out. He wants to tax us more. He doesn't appear to be pro-growth. He would say that he is. He walks around building sites now in hard hats and fluorescent jackets, which means he's definitely stepping into the role of what a proper MP is meant to do, right? But what does he represent, Rebecca?
He represents inauthenticity and absolute nonsense, because he wants to tax us more, but now today he says he wants to tax us less. He can't make his mind up. He's completely inauthentic. And so let me pull out a few bits for you. My issue with him is that he's never transparent in the cost of things. Furlough, he was never transparent with that. He's not been transparent in how much the cost of the Ukraine war is. And then we want to talk about, obviously, rising living costs. How much has all of his little plans actually cost us and has contributed to that? Let's gloss over that and forget it. And then one of my favourite bits is the first thing I want to deliver is peace of mind and get NHS waiting lists down and know that the NHS is there for you and your family when you need them. Tell that to people that die over the next week.
Go on, Amy. What do you think Sunakism is? We had him there long enough to know. We've got to remember that he was driving so many of the decisions behind the scenes anyway during the pandemic as Chancellor. He's just sort of, we've kind of forgotten that.
He just sets plans and does nothing, doesn't he, really? This is Rishi Sunak reveals his vision of the future. I'd say his vision of the future is probably a Labour government, let's be honest, at this point, because this is just absolutely ridiculous, the whole thing. Talking about his belief in the NHS at a time when most of the NHS is about to go on strike is laughable.
He does seem tone deaf so much of the time, doesn't he? He does seem very detached from
reality.
Most people are thinking.
He just says stuff, and does nothing.
Hot air.
He's very good on the global stage, though. That's it. Doesn't it feel to you, though? It does feel that ultimately, I've said this before, he feels like the ultimate globalist. We had a globalist coup in number 10. Suddenly, he's in number 10, and Jeremy Hunt in number 11. How did that even happen? Where's our democracy?
It's absolute insanity. And of course, he's very good on the global stage because they're all his pals. And that's exactly why he's very good on the global stage. But the whole thing is hot air. It's like, it feels like Liz Truss has come back when he's going on about he has plans for growth. Shut up and tell us exactly what you're going to do.
His days are numbered, though, aren't they? And I think that's been highlighted at how terrible he is at PMQs. People are really seeing what a mediocre little man he really is.
He's got 18 months, right, and then we're going to start probably a 6 months up to the next election. Can he do anything, do you think, to turn around the face of the Conservative Party?
He's certainly trying, isn't he? This is just yet another one of his PR stunts.
But it's funny. Ambition to transform educational opportunities at a time when teachers are on the brink and about to strike.
Yeah. Again, I know, and they've already had a pay rise as well. So it's honestly, I don't even know. He's a little bit like, I feel like the same person is advising him as who advised Boris. Remember in those times when he flew to COP26 in a private jet from down south? It feels like whoever advises the Conservative government is absolutely bananas.
Bill Gates? Perhaps. Right, let's move on to early retirement. Driving inflation and harming growth, says a report. Early retirement is stoking inflation and damaging growth while adding pressure to already strained public services. This is a report into Britain's missing workers. What's this about, Amy?
This is hilarious. The government absolutely love that. This is an inquiry by the House of Lords so that they can deflect their responsibility and own failings and project them onto people who retired between the ages of 50 and 64 because they wanted a pleasant life and early retirement. That is hilarious. To me, who else can you blame? You've tried to blame the immigrants. Liz Truss then broke the economy. We've blamed poor people. We've blamed rich people. No, we'll just... anyone but them. Anyone. Just take the responsibility away from them.
And Brexit. COVID.
Part of this report, they say it's possible that people got used to different habits and ways of working during the COVID-19 pandemic, which prompted them to reflect on their careers. I certainly know people who did that, particularly working mums, actually, that realised they'd been running ragged for years, and suddenly lockdown made them stay at home, and they weren't running around like they were, and they decided to get a different work-life balance. That's all right, isn't it?
Yeah.
That side of it is all right, but...
Yes, it is. It is. But it's... Why do we keep on pinpointing things? Like, really? Early retirement driving inflation and harming growth? Is it? I don't think so. I think the government are doing that all by themselves.
Totally.
I don't think that it is people who are retiring. They've worked really hard for a very long time. They've been undervalued, they've been underpaid, they've been under-supported, and they're like, we're done.
But also, surely we just been talking about Sunakism. Surely Sunakism would be a world in which you would want people to be able to retire early.
I would have thought so.
If you work really hard your whole life, then why not retire at between 50 and 64? That's the main driver of the trend. Why is that not something that they
like an aspiration?
Yes.
You'd think that they would be pushing that, exactly. And these people probably can retire early because they bought their houses for 50p in 1976. Happy days. I think it's an unbelievable target for them to try and shift the blame onto early retirement.
Well, it does seem extraordinary.
They're very desperate now, if that's who they're going for.
Oh, well, yeah, you know, they've used every other trick in the book, haven't they? So let's go for the people that have retired too early. But to be fair, are people really retiring that much early? I feel like people are working longer because people have chosen to have actual careers rather than jobs. My grandparents, bless them, I'm 38. I don't remember. They retired when I was about 2 years old.
Yeah, and actually one of the main reasons that people are out of work is because of long-term illness due to the massive NHS waiting list. So we kind of talk about it frivolously, like, oh, they've chosen to retire, but actually a lot of this also comes down to NHS failings. Which is also at the door of the government.
Very much so. The House of Lords Committee looks at 565,000 workers who left the job market since the start of the pandemic. So they are saying, as you were saying, Amy, that a lot of people are out of work due to long-term illness being at a record high. Again, what did you think was going to happen if you locked people in their houses, closed gyms, encouraged us to eat, and we all drank more?
Oh, we really drank. We were on a permanent holiday for... Well, I wasn't. It only lasted about 6 weeks for me because I was in mental health care. But can I just say, there's so much illness around at the minute and people can't shift. Like, I've had this ridiculous illness for about 2 months now, and so many people around me have had it. I think it's because of how people were locked up and not associating with each other and all the rest of it, that actually it's made things a lot worse in the long run.
There certainly appears to be some immune system damage.
But these are also, routine things, people waiting for cataracts appointments, people waiting for hip replacements. It's kind of more of the mundane waiting list that they just can't seem to cope with because... there's not enough staff, there's so many problems, it's really hard, it's massive striking now. So unless they get a grip on the workforce and make it a possibility that we can have a strong workforce, then this is going to happen.
Let me tell you what some of you have been saying today. This is in relation to the nurses' strikes. Paul said, I was on a stroke ward 4 weeks ago. They had 15 nurses all in a handover meeting for about 1.5 hours, sat laughing, showing pictures on their phones, very little about patients or their care. You see nurses wondering about doing nothing, and when someone buzzes for help, no one comes. You have to ask visitors to go and find someone. Melanie has said nurses get enough money. Most of us don't get a nurse's wage. If they can't live on 30k plus per year, then they should cut their expenses. Just briefly, ladies, do you think we should have a time where nurses... I honestly think one of the worst things we did for nurses was making them go in at degree level. You do not need a degree in nursing to come out with 50 grand of debt. You surely should be able to do some sort of conversion.
My mum was a nurse. She definitely, bless her, hi mum. She definitely didn't have a degree, and she was a fantastic nurse. She's one of the most caring, and you know, my mum is obviously all over this whole situation. She doesn't agree with the strikes. She says that we need to bring back matrons and have more orderly conduct. conduct, because unfortunately, what the gentleman says there is absolutely true.
I think you're right. Well, let's see what you were saying. We had this poll running this morning to say, should Rishi Sunak find the funds to pay nurses more? Over 4,000 of you have responded. Thank you very much. And 55% of you think no, he should not find that money. Right, we've come to the end of our show. It has flown by again. Amy Nicole, thank you so much. Rebecca Jane, appreciate your time on a busy week. We're running up to Christmas. You've probably got loads you could have been doing today. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I am Bev Turner. Have a lovely day. I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And if you've enjoyed what we've done today, just tell one friend. That's your homework. Just tell one mate. Turn on GB News. And we are here, obviously, back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I will see you then.
Hello there. Welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. An improving picture today with some sunshine through the afternoon, although still squally showers across the north as well as the west. Here's your bigger picture. You can see this area of low pressure across the northwest of the country. That's going to stay with us for the next few days, delivering showers, longer spells of rain from time to time. However, through this afternoon, bright with some sunshine across England and Wales, breezy across the northern and western portion of Wales, where we could see a few showers running in, and frequent showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Certainly towards the west, we'll see some wet weather here. And over the highest ground, some winteriness. But for much of eastern Scotland, you'll see some brighter skies through the afternoon, a similar situation further south as temperatures rise very nicely. Now, through the evening and overnight, those showers continue across more northern and western areas with severe gales across the far northwest of Scotland. Elsewhere, you can see this showery rain moving in across Wales, northern England, the Midlands, the West Country, slowly slipping down towards the southeast as we head through tomorrow morning, although it could be a bit of a foggy start here first thing, and even a touch of frost in shelter spots towards eastern areas of Scotland as well. So through the morning, you can see this rain clearing yet again towards the southeast. Before that, though, around rush hour, expect some moderate bursts. Further north, these showers will become more frequent and widespread as we head through the day on Wednesday, and again, snow over the highest peaks. The showers extending down towards Northern Ireland as temperatures rise yet again to around 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. So that's the picture on Wednesday. Through Wednesday evening and overnight, you can see this feature just running in across Ireland, and that will yet again affect the central swathe of the country as we head through Wednesday night and into Thursday. Showers further north. And here's your outlook for the next few days. It's turning colder across the far north with some snow showers, rain from time to time further south.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate but